Hi folks, welcome along to Season 3, Episode 1 of the Foundry. This is an update of the kids ministry training that we do, Foundations of Kids Ministry. You probably will be getting this as a link on an email if you're already involved in kids ministry, if you've been involved in Waratah Kids, or you're looking possibly to be involved. This will be sent to you, and there are also notes attached with this as well that we'll be moving through. If you've been part of the original training on this, do stick around. There's about 50% of new material in this new training. I thought what we would do is have a quick prayer and then get on with it. Let's pray first. Dear Lord, we thank you so much that we are able to bring your gospel to children. You said, let the little children come, and we want to facilitate their coming to you. Help us to have a childlike faith, Lord. Help us to know you in a way that kids can see that there is something different about us, and help us to do kids ministry well in a way that honours you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Well, as usual, when we do Foundry trainings, we begin with a Getting Your Thoughts section. In the last kids ministry training, it was a Getting Your Thoughts based around what we call a KISS survey, K-I-S-S, and that stands for Keep, Improve, Start, and Stop. When you receive the notes attached to this, you'll find that what I wanted to do for this session is that, but backwards. And one of the problems we face, especially in kids ministry, is, we tend to just keep adding things or trying to keep improving things without actually going through a process of clarification. And clarification often involves the removal of stuff. Kids ministry is a great example of one of those things that churches do where, you can still poke your head into a cupboard and see some resources that are there from the 80s or mid-90s, etc. So I like to do a reverse survey, and I actually tried to introduce this in a school context as part of the board at Falcon Primary. Because it forces us, when we go in reverse, to clarify our thoughts, what really matters. So you don't get to move on until you have answered the questions in sequence. And, like I said, we're going backwards. We're going to do a stick survey. So it is stop first, then start, improve, and keep. And you can't move on to things to start or improve or even keep, until you first answered the stop question. It's, I guess, an awareness that every yes implies a no. We just can't do it all. We just can't. And if we try to do it all, then we just end up bogged down. So, first of all, ask yourself, in relation to kids ministry, both at Waratah or in general, things that tend to happen in the kids ministry space, what needs to be stopped? What do we need to stop doing or stop trying to do? Have a think about that first. And then once you've answered that, feel free to move on to, okay, what should we start doing? And then, is there anything that we are doing that we really need to improve? And lastly, what can we just keep? What's just working really well? Quite honestly, I think that we should definitely keep the people that are involved because I think that you guys that are involved in Waratah Kids, in any field of kids ministry, in fact, in the church, are doing an unbelievable job. One of the reasons why I know that was stepping into Waratah Kids myself this year having to cover for some Sundays where there was no one available to do it. I thought, if I'm going to call people to this, I need to be able to, get in there, get amongst it myself. And, it's not always easy, as you guys know. So I want to thank you for what you guys do, because it was a really great way of going, okay, these are some of the issues, and this is how difficult it can be. But anyway, getting back to the survey, it's stop, start, improve, and keep. And answer those in order. Feel free to pause this video here if you want to take a moment to answer those. Welcome back. I imagine you might have paused the video. If not, welcome back. We're moving on to point 2 in the notes, which is moving forward in kids ministry. This is some of the especially new material since last time. It will say on the notes this evening, because it was originally going to be an evening session, but this video, if you like, or this training, seeks also to define how to get involved in kids ministry. What are the issues? What you need to be involved. Not that we're going to do a whole nother Safe Church training here again. And also, what are we trying to achieve? What we're trying to achieve, really, I guess, is making disciples who will one day be disciple makers themselves. You don't necessarily, and this is the great news, need epic, massive or buzzing kids ministry programs for that to happen. A lot of it comes out of relationship, and that's good news. The point, I guess, is that ministry to kids is not first and foremost about having a great curriculum. All these things matter, of course, or being a skilled teacher. Again, great if you are, but that's not number one. It's not also even having on-point behaviour management strategies, as important as they are. Kids ministry that forms disciples is about, first and foremost, forming relationships with young people and loving them where they're at, first and foremost. Now, having said that, here comes the but statement, if you like. But at some point, of course, we do need to place the flesh on the bones. Okay, fine, that's all great, but what does that actually look like? What does forming positive relationships with kids and families and loving them actually look like? Well, of course, this is partly where Sunday morning kids ministry comes in. Now, since the last intro to kids ministry training, we've actually decided as elders to adopt a goal. It's a long-term strategic goal that we think is achievable, not overnight, and we've got to be very careful how we roll this out. But, because we don't want to burn people out. But basically, and it's highlighted in yellow on your sheet, we want to ensure that one day, and I would argue that that's hopefully before the end of 2022, but one day there is some level of deliberate, focused children's ministry occurring every single Sunday of the calendar year at Waratah Church. We've noticed in the past that even when we can run great kids ministries over the term, when you have holidays, especially the big long 6, sometimes 6.5, 7 week summer holidays, there really is that loss of contact with some families. And I guess a loss of momentum, if you want to use a buzzword. But we would like to be able to go, you know what, we are not going to be governed by the school year. We're going to do things our way. And there is no reason why, if we as a church are not passionate about seeing children and families come to Christ, there's no reason why we can't do it every single Sunday. It takes time. We've got to structure it correctly. We've got to make sure we don't burn people out. But it is possible, because nothing is impossible with God. We want to be known in the community. This is answering that question, what does it look like to form relationships with kids and families? Well, part of it is being known as, among other things, a church where a family with primary-aged kids can come on a Sunday and never, ever feel like they've picked the wrong Sunday to come to church, or that they are in any way an inconvenience. One thing that really kills relationships is that feeling that you're an inconvenience. I remember, years ago now, Alicia and I, when we go on holidays, we like to visit other churches, and occasionally we visit a church as a family, i.e. with Josh with us. And sometimes on holidays he's having a sleepover with in-laws, but anyway. And you just know when you've turned up with, at that stage, I think it was a 3-year-old kid on a school holiday period, and there was nothing there available for kids and families, and you just kind of felt like, we've picked the wrong Sunday. And it just felt like, Josh was a real big inconvenience. So we want to make sure that no family feels like that at Waratah, that they've never picked the wrong Sunday, as it were. And that's really important, making sure that there's something every week for families without burning out our leaders. So that's why we've been drafting in, as it were, so many new leaders. By the way, notice that we're not saying teachers anymore. You do not need to have a teaching background to be involved in kids ministry. If you have, great, fantastic, awesome, but you don't need to be a teacher. It's youth ministry, or kids ministry, I should say, not a different version of school. And so we've drafted in more and more folks, and now there is a possibility, at best 12. We could have up to 12 on the team for Waratah kids heading into term 4, minimal 9. And that just spreads it out so much more evenly. But we would like to, once we've got a really healthy during the term team with its own coordinator, then we would also like to, from other areas of the congregation where folks may not feel like they can do full-on kids ministry, as it were, but they're happy to, supervise some colouring in or something for kids to just work on out the back. It would be really great to have 2 separate ministries, Waratah Kids, that is during the term, and underneath the umbrella of Waratah Kids, maybe the Waratah Kids Holiday Club, which is not so much, as I said, teaching a curriculum like Superbook or something like that, but just looking to, be there as a supervised activity space during the holidays for kids and families. But that would be run hopefully by a completely different team, so that the other folks get a rest on the school holidays from doing Waratah Kids. Not that people, if someone's really passionate and they want to do both, that's fine, but it's not an expectation. We want to make sure, as I said, that we form relationships. And in order to form relationships with kids and form relationships with families, there's got to be regular contact. And it's pretty much impossible to have regular contact if folks just don't know what Sunday they should or shouldn't turn up on, because they're not sure if there's going to be something available to them. So we're looking to fix that. That's one of the most practical ways in which we can make sure that we are known as a church that really cares about kids and families. By the way, if you know someone who's, passionate about getting involved in some way or contributing to kids ministry, but not kind of at the level of wanting to be a leader of Waratah Kids or teaching a curriculum, as it were, maybe you might want to suggest that to them. The Holiday Club. We're moving on to point 3, and there's also a bit of an activity in this area where you might want to pause it and have a think about it and note some things down as well. So point 3, values-based. What does that mean? What does it mean? Kids ministry is part of the church's ministry to the world. In one sense, the entire church should be involved in kids ministry because Jesus gave the instruction to his earliest followers to make disciples as they went into the world around them. But how do we actually make disciples? Well, first of all, disciples refers to many different people from many different backgrounds and generations. But one of the best ways to be ineffective is to try and target everyone or to do everything in a single ministry or a single approach. Moreover, culture is an outflow of alignment, and alignment is created by specifics rather than a cloud of ideas. Let me pause there for a second and explain that, because that's a bit of jargon. What I mean by that is that any organisation, but a church is an organisation because it's a bunch of people trying to get organised to carry out a singular mission. But any group of people or any organisation that are trying to carry out a certain objective, a certain mission, eventually are going to take on a certain culture. Someone asked me once, some of you may remember this, but to define what is the definition of culture. I define culture as the 10,000 invisible assumptions that hang in the air above everyone's head that everyone else is expected to know. If you've ever been to a foreign country, here's me, middle-class white guy. I turn up to somewhere like the Philippines or Canada, and they both have something similar in their culture. There's an assumption that when you walk in the door of someone's house, you take your shoes off. As an Aussie, I never do that, which is why our doormat is filthy, because I never take my shoes off, neither does Alicia, and definitely neither does Josh, and we just walk in all the bits of grass clippings and all that kind of stuff, and sand, etc. But, we're Aussies, and that's part of culture, and we just don't care, because whatever. There's an assumption, though, that if you do that overseas, that's pretty rude in some countries. You take your shoes off. You're not told to. You just assume that you know. But that's a part of their culture. And so any group of people, whether it's as big as a whole nation or even just a ministry team or even a sports team, you hear this talked about like in sporting circumstances, team culture, whatever that is. So what's the culture? The culture of kids ministry should be, let's form relationships with kids. There should be a culture of kids matter. We're passionate about the souls of young people. We're passionate about families. We're excited. We're expecting God to do great things amongst young people. These are some of the hallmarks that should be a part of the culture of a ministry team, especially a kids ministry team. But culture is a product of alignment. It's very hard. In fact, it's virtually impossible to develop a positive culture if all people want to do in that organisation or group of people or team is their own preferences. And this is, if you look actually very carefully, one of the number one things that the New Testament writers, especially Paul, are dealing with after you kind of get past the book of Acts in all those letters. There's these amazing new communities of faith that are formed in the first century, these new churches. Just when you think everything's going fine and dandy, someone comes in from left field with their own opinions and their own ideas, and treating those opinions and ideas as if they're law, or dare I say it, gospel, and they're breaking up the central focus. They're breaking up the alignment. And there's dissension and arguments and so on and so forth. So there's got to be alignment in the midst of any team. And alignment is created by focusing on a specific goal. And of course, for the New Testament writers, particularly someone like Paul, he doesn't just say, shut up and get on with each other, get along with each other, although one place he does say, just for goodness sake, just get along with each other. But he tells them why they should do that, and he outlines specific things in the Gospels about who Jesus was and what he did on their behalf, and how because of what he specifically did for them, they have then no right to turn around and complain or dissent or whatever. And so we've got to get specific. And that's really important because we need alignment, and alignment is what produces culture. When everyone is going in the same direction, aligned around something specific, that's when you get a real healthy culture. So, hopefully that explains all of that. We've got to have specifics rather than just random clouds of ideas. So before actually doing anything in order to create alignment in kids' ministry, we've got to ask the question, what biblical values need to be seen in any given Sunday of Waratah kids? You can talk about specifics in terms of we're going to do this, that is, we're going to do this at this point, we're going to have the activity before the teaching, and then we're going to do the morning tea in this spot. That's not the specifics that I'm talking about. In terms of how you do things, that should be free for anyone to interpret how, to do it as they please, depending on what lesson they want to present that day. What I'm talking about when it comes to specifics is what specific values. What specific values are we seeing as a ministry team as most important that we are going to freely align ourselves around and thereby create a positive culture? You'll notice on your notes that there are some blank spaces because I'd really love to get some feedback from folks around specific values. I've just filled in the first three to kind of get you moving. So to start the conversation, I've put worshipful. There should be an element of worship to kids' ministry. And that's not necessarily singing songs. I'm talking about reverence for God and adoration of God. Transparency, very important, that people feel that they can be transparent, but also that we do, that we are honest with kids and transparent. Transparency is so important for children's ministry. I guess this next one flows on from it. Safety. There's got to be a sense of safety. Obviously not just physical safety, but mental, emotional, and spiritual safety. There's more that I could put down there, but there's just three specific values that we, I would think, need to align around. Take a moment, pause this, and take a moment to add what you think are the specific values that we need to align around as a children's ministry. Welcome back if you've unpaused. I just want to finish off this third point. Let's say you've got those values down in those spaces there. I'm glad you've put some ideas down because it's then and only then when we've talked about values that we can move on to brainstorm how do we execute these values in a practical way. So just going off mine because I don't know yet what you've put down, but okay, worship. How do we execute that value? How do we create an atmosphere of reverence for God and worship in kids ministry? And that may be different from week to week, but at least you know the value that you're aiming for. Okay. Point 4. Some of this stuff, not all, is out of the previous set of trainings, or section, or part 1, I should say, of kids ministry. And this next part, has been edited. So who can get involved? Who can get involved? Aside from a passion for Christ, there are 4 key areas for getting involved in Waratah Kids. You've got to genuinely care about kids, and that you can at some level relate to them in a friendly way on their level. I have to work very hard at that. I mean, I love kids, but I mean, I often get feedback, Peter, you've got to dull it down, stop doing the jingo and the jargon, I should say. But because I genuinely care about the kids understanding stuff, I work hard to try and change my language to pitch it at their level. You've got to love to have fun and join in on games and activities or crafts where appropriate. There's no point just telling kids to do stuff and not being willing to, again, where you can, get involved. Okay, you might not exactly be able to run around in a circle when you're playing Duck, Duck, Goose, for example. But, sitting with a kid and doing a worksheet with them, like a maze or a word sleuth, alongside them, that can be really fun and, brings us down to their level in a good way. You've got to be reliable as well, commitment to the responsibilities of the role. I remember I upset someone when I was first here at Waratah. It was a dumb idea to do this, I guess, but I was a bit of a hothead, and someone said to me once in a youth ministry context, if you're ever stuck on a night, I'm happy to help out, just give us a call. And I said to the person, yeah, that's pretty useless. In fact, it's even worse than kind of nothing, because it actually takes more effort when you've got, at the time anyway, 25 primary school kids running around your knees. To jump on a phone call with someone to see if there's a chance that they've got nothing else planned and they can come down. Not only is it just not a reality and it's an absolute lottery, but it's actually taking your focus off the kids in order to have that telephone conversation. So it's kind of one of the most useless things, really. I know it sounds brutal, but I think we've just got to be honest. When it comes to kids ministry or even youth ministry, maybe just any ministry, we're not looking for helpers. We're looking for people who are committed to it. I mean, I just think we just need to be honest about that, because it's not fair on people who think we are just looking for helpers or just give us a call when you need us, only to then get angry when we need them and they're not available. It's not fair. So whether it's a leader or an assistant, you've got to be reliable and be committed to that roster for that term. And D, being a good communicator. Again, that's not just about speaking and presentation. I know people that have doubted themselves when it comes to maybe doing something like this, like teaching a course or speaking on screen or live. But, let them read a kid's story and they're amazing communicators. You can see the kids just eating out of their hand. So, there's different forms of communication. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of safe church considerations in all of that. Working with children checks, safe church, leadership forms, and so on. If you haven't done that yet, get in touch with the office and we will make sure that the relevant forms are filled out and done. So I'm going to move on from that paragraph there that talks about kind of the safe churchy stuff, and just go down to that point D note there where it says, point D is not what you think. Part of getting better at kids ministry is communicating well with parents as well. It's not just about communicating with kids. It's communicating also with parents. What we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, how long we're doing it for, and so on. Especially as we get new folks coming into the church, new families, we've got to make sure that as children's ministry leaders, we've got to be able to have a really good rapport with the parents that come in. A lot of people decide very, very quickly if they're going to attend a church or not by basically how they found the folks that were serving in the kids ministry area. That is, of course, those that have kids. So, yeah. If we pay attention to what matters most to parents, then we'll also likely be running a ministry that's effective in its outreach. I think that's one area where the youth has been a bit of a success, where, some of the things that have been addressed in the youth this year especially have also been things that parents are really concerned about with their kids, stuff like anxiety and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to elaborate, but what matters to parents, ministering into the sort of areas that really matter to parents as well, and in terms of how they see the issues that their kids are dealing with, it's really powerful. So, yeah. There's a bunch of stuff in the notes from last time regarding safety and security. Obviously, that was one of my values earlier. So that's there in the previous notes. If you've done the previous training, then go over that again. If you haven't, go over it again, go over it now. Feel free to pause the screen and have a read. I guess as a flyover, all I want to say is we've just kind of got to realise as churches that we're sort of just not the good guys anymore. We don't get an automatic free pass from the society around us. At the end of the day, I'm not saying that we personally committed sin X, Y, and Z. I understand that. But like it or not, it has fallen to us to take responsibility for the rebuilding of the reputation of the church and, by extension, Jesus Christ in our society. One of the most powerful ways that we can do that is in the ways where we have failed in the past. The reason why these, I guess for some people, buzzwords of, emotional, mental, etc., spiritual safety, these sort of things are so important. The reason why Safe Church and all that sort of stuff is so important is not because it's just important. It is important, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to exceed expectations of folks in our community, for them to go, oh, wow, I didn't realise that churches cared that much about what they were doing and how they were doing it. So please read that safety and security section just there on, I think it's page 3 of the notes, at the bottom of page 3. There's an update here as well. Since the last kids ministry training, please bear in mind that we have been working really hard to create a higher awareness of Waratah Church amongst the community and find various areas of synergy with schools and other children's and families' organisations in the South Mandurah region. More and more, we would like to see Waratah Kids as a place of outreach, not just caring for the kids of the church, so that they can focus, so the parents can focus on the sermon. I know I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite here because I'm exactly one of these people. I can say that now also because I'm not preaching as often. Sometimes it's just really nice, the fact that Josh is being cared for so that I can focus on the sermon of whoever's preaching that day. But actually, the long game is to not just settle for that. The long game is to plug in Waratah Kids with all of the other kids and families outreach stuff that we've got going on. In fact, we're looking to bring in user groups that use this building during the week, and parents and so on and so forth. We're looking to bring them in on the same mailing list as the weekly wrap every week, basically just treating the other 200 and something people that possibly use this building during the week as if they were already part of the church. You can talk about that more with me later, but essentially I'm saying we need to be ready. We need to be ready when we're talking about Waratah Kids to not just be running something which is a, babysitting group, I suppose, for kids of church parents so they can listen to a sermon, but is actually deliberate and focused on making sure that we are genuinely making disciples. Not that it wasn't, by the way. Don't misunderstand me. But sometimes I just think that we need to expect that we're going to see folks from out in the community starting to turn up on Sunday morning with their kids and embrace that idea. So, yeah. Also, the space that we occupy informs a lot of how we're going to engage with the content that's going to be presented when we do present things. We actually know we actually know this in the back of our minds, which is why we tend to fill the, industrial kind of spaces with redundant equipment, so that the room can take on a more friendly feel. If you walk into a space which is just bare and it just looks like an abandoned factory, the first thing you kind of want to do, especially if you're doing some sort of families related ministry or whatever, is just fill it with, I don't know, equipment, toys, whatever, just to make it feel more family focused. All I'm saying by that is that the space is powerful, and we just kind of know this already subconsciously. But the great news is that there can be some permanent, well-executed fixtures and artwork that can brighten a room and really create a sense of warmth and ownership. I think one of the best things to point to here is, even in our own church auditorium, just the update of all the soundboards around with Francine's artwork. It just lifts the building in an incredible way. It changes the vibe of the hall. And I love that there's actually explanations next to each picture, because it's not just that they're beautiful, but they're also communicating something. And even that communicates the fact that we're serious about the gospel. We're serious about what the Bible says, that beauty matters, that art matters as a way of actually communicating to people the greatest truths in the universe. So it's changed something. It's changed a feeling within the church hall. But we can do that in the other hall as well, where we do kids ministry. And space is a really important factor of doing kids ministry, especially executing some of those values. So maybe if you'd like to pause this training, we would love for you to list 3 things, very simple things, that you think would create a more family feel or vibe, if you like, in the rear hall. I'm going to have another sip of my cup of tea, but if you want to add some ideas in that space, please do so now. And you can pause the video if you need to as well. Okay. Welcome back. Lastly, I know we did this last time, but I wanted to remind folks the importance of friendly faces in kids ministry. We want to make sure that, just like churches, kids ministries are friendly places for not just kids to walk into, but also the parents of kids. Since it's a bit general, I want to nail it down a bit further. Your subconsciousness, my subconsciousness, we as human beings, we subconsciously are asking 3 questions whenever we walk into a room, especially a new space. And they are these. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you get me? In other words, we want to be noticed, we want to be heard, we want to be taken seriously. There are 3 things that you can do to basically take away, remove, pull out someone's humanity, someone's dignity. You can ignore them, not even looking at them. You can refuse to listen to them, like talking over the top of them. And you can dismiss them. Don't do those things. Sometimes I just like to bring out the negative side to make it even more clear. But basically, you and I both know when people aren't really noticing you. And you know when people don't give a rip about what you're saying, and you know when they're not even listening. So all of us are asking those three questions. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you get me? We want to be noticed, we want to be heard, we want to be taken seriously. So the final exercise is really simple. Brainstorm 3 ways in which you can answer those 3 questions in the mind of a child walking into Waratah Kids. How can you, maybe in the first 5 minutes, communicate to any and every child that I really see you there, and I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, or at least what you're trying to say? How are we going to communicate that to kids? Maybe brainstorm it now. Feel free to pause. Well, if you've clicked play again, after filling in those 3 fields at the end of the notes, thanks for putting up with us for 40 minutes. I know it's a long time, especially to listen to me. But please, if you've enjoyed this training, recommend it to someone else, not just anyone. I mean, okay, fine, maybe anyone, but also maybe you want to tap someone on the shoulder in the church that you think would be great at kids ministry and get them to have a look at some of this stuff. Invite them in, bring them in. I find that sometimes the best way to sort of draft people in is to not call people out, say you should be doing, but don't call people out, call people in. And hopefully we get an even bigger team. Again, especially one of the differences from the last set of notes is we're not just talking about Sunday morning during the school term anymore with Waratah Kids. The next phase, moving into next year, is to then also be able to run something of a Waratah Kids holiday club so that we can one day get to a point where any kid and any family on any Sunday can walk into Waratah Church and know that they are seen, that they are heard, that they are understood, and that we care about the spiritual development of kids. So I hope there's a blessing for you in all of that, and thank you for, again, listening to this training. We'll see you for the next one. Ta-da.